This episode is really for everyone. We all need to learn how to position not just products and services, but also ourselves. April Dunford has launched this brilliant book called Obviously Awesome, and we get down deep. And I mean, we really talk about everything. We talk about the inspiration for the book, the real value behind positioning. You know, positioning is a strategic underpinning for everything that we do in sales and marketing, and yet it is very misunderstood and very rarely done well. And we talk about it. We talk about what positioning is not. If you thought branding and messaging, you weren't alone. I thought that too until I read this book. We talk about the pitfalls of pitch competitions, and we even chat about, no surprise, how writing a book is so hard. We both have definitely underestimated the amount of work in creating it. And we talk about so much more. It's a really great episode, and I can't wait for you to take out so much of the value, the nuggets, the sparkle behind things. And it's just really magical. She really does give us a lot of secret sauce ingredients. And I was thinking about this the other day because I got a couple of messages from people about, writing a book, because I guess everyone has a book or two inside of them. And that makes total sense. So I thought I'll do a separate Q&A for anyone that wants to join my book launch team for the Connect the Dots, Turning Strangers into Meaningful Network Relationships. And for those that want that behind the scenes, the good, bad, and the ugly. We'll definitely talk about that. So anyways, I can't wait for you to hear this episode. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did, because it's obviously awesome. Welcome to the Can Innovate podcast, the first ever podcast designed to showcase Canadian thought leadership. These innovators share industry insights, entrepreneurial best practices, lessons learned, and other tips that we can incorporate right into our lives, our careers, and our businesses. So let's get inspired. So we have the brilliant and talented April Dunford on the podcast today. You have no idea how much I actually admire this lady. Not only is she is funny beyond belief. She's super smart, super talented, and she really is a much sought out international speaker on the topics of positioning, market strategy, new product introduction. You could totally tell I get really geeky and more excited about this. But what's more interesting is that April is a positioning consultant. Okay, I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing, is what exactly does that mean? And we're going to get to that, that's for sure. And, her track record speaks for itself. 7 successful technology startups, 3 global tech giants, over 16 products, and so much more. So April definitely knows how to make magic happen, and she's starting to share these secrets in her new book called Obviously Awesome, How to Nail Product Positions so get customers to get it, buy it, and love it. So welcome, April.
Hey, it's so good to be here. Thanks so much.
Congrats on the book, which is getting seriously rave reviews. Congrats. That must feel so wow.
Yeah, you know what? It does feel good. I got to say, this book was a giant pain in the butt to make. It was way harder than I thought. And I actually started and stopped writing the books a number of times. So it's fun to have it actually out there. And then it's the thing that I'm really enjoying is that people are finding it useful. That was my big worry. Was I wanted to write a book about kind of a complicated topic. So I wanted to make it easier to understand it. I wanted people to read it and say, that's really useful. I'm going to use that. And so far I'm getting feedback like that. It's only been a couple of weeks, so who knows? But yeah, so far I've been pretty pleased with the reception.
Oh, well, it's seriously, I was looking at it and I was like, wow. And it was sold out. I think it was for pre-order, was already sold out.
It was a little nuts. I don't even understand how that's possible, because it's print on demand, so they should never sell out. But at one point, the Canadians, I guess the Amazon in Canada had stocked a bunch of books, but then the Canadians were all piling in there. And so we were sold out for 6 hours. There was no books in Canada. And people were all yelling at me, where's the book? And I'm like, they've got it at Indigo. And everyone's like, we never buy anything at Indigo, which is really sad. That's our big Canadian bookseller. But Anyways, so yeah, it was sold out for like 6 hours and everybody was losing their minds and like, I'm going to be sold out. But anyway, it's fine now. But I'm learning a lot about the book business in this as well. But it's always good to have not just Amazon. That's what I learned in that is you don't want to be too reliant on just Amazon, because if Amazon messes up, you're kind of stuffed.
Good to know. Good to know. So I guess the heart of it all is, what exactly is a positioning consultant?
Well, yeah. So this has been a long road. So, positioning, I would say positioning as a concept is a really fundamental marketing concept. And yet it is super widely misunderstood. And when I started in marketing, I actually have a degree in engineering, and I'm kind of accidentally ended up in marketing at a tech company. So my first job at a university, I got a job at a startup because my friend worked there and got me a job, and it happened to be in the marketing department. And one of the first products I worked on, we did a repositioning, and this product was a bit of a dog. It was this little database, and we had built it to be kind of like a better spreadsheet, except it had SQL. So it was kind of like Microsoft Access, except with SQL. And so we didn't really know what it was. When we built it, I think it was built specifically for a customer. We didn't know who was going to buy it. We put it on the market and it just didn't work. And we got a lucky break in that we noticed that people were using it in a different way than we had intended it at the first. So, this was so long ago, like it's my first job at a university, and people were just starting to have laptops. And so we noticed that people were using it as a database on a laptop that could sync up with an SQL database back at corporate. And nobody had ever built one of those before. And so we added a couple features, but mainly what we did was reposition it as an embeddable database for mobile devices. And nobody had ever seen one of those before. And it was super needed, and mobile devices were just becoming a thing. And so we did this repositioning. The product took off. We got acquired. We got acquired by a big database company in the Valley. My boss quit. I ended up taking over the whole department. And so here I am, 2 years out of engineering school, managing this great big global thing in marketing with like a big team and big budget. And I literally can't even spell marketing. But the one thing I learned in that job was this positioning thing, man, it can kind of make you or break you. So I thought I should go figure out what this positioning thing's all about. And maybe learn some marketing stuff while I'm at it, because I know nothing. So I started taking all these courses and reading books, and I learned a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of marketing theory to get your arms around at the beginning. But this thing of positioning seems so fundamental to me. Like positioning fundamentally defines, this is what my product is. This is how it's different and better than all the other products out there. This is the market I'm intending to win. And this is why you should care, basically, as a customer. And yet, in all this stuff that I learn in my intense self-study course in marketing, there was a lot of talk about positioning, but there was no methodology. And that just made me crazy. Mm-hmm. Like the little engineer in me was like, what? What? What do you mean there's no methodology? Like we just make it up? We just kind of guess? Is that how we do this? And so over the years, working startup after startup after startup, I developed my own methodology that I was using for myself. And when I talked to other senior marketers, we were all doing positioning. It's not like positioning wasn't a thing. We were all doing it. But we were all kind of making it up as we went along. So I'm, stealing best practices from other people I come across and all this stuff. And at some point I thought, I should teach this. Like everybody needs to know this. And I had to learn it the hard way. Everybody I know had to learn it the hard way. So I should teach it. And then I kind of embarked on a few years of trying to teach this stuff, like, going and giving talks on it. And I'm a EIR at a handful of different accelerators. So I'm doing workshops on it. And eventually, it took me a long time, first to really understand it, then to get it to a place where I could teach it. And then in the last few years, I've transitioned to just being a consultant. And that's all I do now is work with companies and teach them positioning stuff. So we work through positioning, mainly for kind of companies that I used to work for, like earlier growth stage startups. Well, this is a long answer to your question, but that's how I ended up here.
Well, you've worked with some really incredible brands and companies, like, there's no doubt about that. But I'm wondering, is Is the confusion about positioning, is it because people think it's the same as branding or messaging?
Oh gosh, it's terrible. Like, you know what? Marketers like to take a word and then make it mean 1,000 different things until we don't know what it means anymore. Even if you ask marketers, like, define branding, like, no one knows what that is. And so positioning is even worse because we don't know how to do it. It's even worse. So most of the time when I talk to people about positioning, the first thing I have to do is tell you what positioning is not. So it's not a tagline. It's not messaging. It's not branding. All of those things flow from positioning. So positioning is kind of like the underlying strategic stuff that all your marketing and sales programs rely on. And the positioning is an input to that stuff. So positioning essentially defines how your product is the best in the world at delivering something that a defined market of customers cares a lot about. So it defines what your key unique capabilities are. It defines what your value is. It defines who your product is for. And it defines the market that you intend to win, or so the market you play in. And you kind of need all that stuff before you can write messaging. You need all that stuff before you can go build a brand around it. You need all that stuff before I can do demand generation. I need all that stuff before I can build sales programs. So it's kind of the underlying set of strategic decisions you make about your product and your business. And it's the foundation upon which all your stuff that you're doing in marketing and sales is built on top of that, which is kind of some deep shit, right? like when you think about it. And so that's pretty important, because if you mess that up, like if I look at that first product that I worked on, we defined ourselves as, our competitor was Microsoft Access, and what we were was a low footprint personal use database. And what we were good for is, we had this SQL thing. And so if you're super geeky, that was better than Access. Why? I don't think we really knew. and who was it for? I don't know. I don't think we really had a good handle on that either. And so we kind of fell into this sort of default positioning, and then we built marketing programs on top of that. And the product was crappy because our foundation was crappy. Like, none of our programs worked because what we were was not that compelling. And so instead, what you have to do is kind of, at some point, you got to take a step back and say, is this really the best we can do? Like, is this really what we are? Does that really make our value obvious to the people that we're trying to communicate it to? And what business are we in? And who is this for? A lot of times, products, when they first get made, this stuff kind of happens by default, but markets change and consumer behavior changes and buyers change, and your product itself, there's features coming in and out of that. And what you set out to build at the beginning may not actually be the best way to explain what you've got now. And so it helps positioning is super important. You have to kind of take this big step back and say, if these are our key unique things that we can do, what value does that drive, and who cares a lot about that value? And if I have to communicate that value to these people, what's the context I weave around that? Meaning, fundamentally, what market am I in? So you see a lot of companies that start as one thing and go to something else, right? Like we started, again, in this database example, we started as this like low footprint, whatever access thing. And then what we became was an embedded database for mobile devices, which was super interesting and super valuable. The product difference between those two things was almost nothing. So that was really just recontextualizing what we did so that everybody could understand, why is it important to have SQL on a small footprint database? Well, it's important because you're on a mobile device and you need to sync up with something back at the office. And that something back at the office runs SQL. So you can't do that with Access. You can't do it with a spreadsheet. You need a thing that's running SQL there to talk to that thing back at the office. And that just made it. And then, so we went from everybody kind of scratching their head going, I don't know if I get it. Why do I care about that? To everyone going, oh, snap, we need that.
The aha.
Right. The aha.
Wow.
So if the positioning is working really well, when you pitch your thing for the first time, and you're pitching it to someone who's right in the middle of your target market, they should get to that aha really fast. Like the awesomeness of what you do should be obvious. And if it isn't, then you got one of two problems, right? Either your product just stinks and no one wants it, which, happens, or you're explaining it in a way that people just don't get it. And so if you've got a product that you've got a whole bunch of happy customers, and then once they've been using it or whatever, they're like, I love it. Don't never take it away from me. I'm so happy. It's so great. And yet your first meeting with a customer is like, I don't get it. Then you probably got a positioning problem. Because there's cool stuff there that the guys that understand what you do 9 meetings later, and sign up for your thing and pay, they get it and they love it. It's just the first meeting, everyone's all squinty-eyed, like, I don't know what you are exactly. Say it again. Pitch it to me again. That's when you got positioning stuff going on.
Well, it's funny because you said something at one of the Tech Toronto when we were just chatting about it, and you mentioned about pitch contests, about how they're not that great because there's no context. And I was yes, I totally feel that way. Yeah, my eyes gloss over.
I have so many reasons to hate pitch contests. Like I could literally we could spend the rest of this podcast talking about pitch contests. Or like what I hate the most about pitch contests is like a great sales pitch for a product. You spend a lot of time thinking about who's in the audience and what they understand and how to connect with that. But in a pitch contest, you've got a room full of people who, for the most part, probably look nothing like your target customer. So you're building a pitch that is very specific for a pitch contest audience, which is freaking stupid. That has nothing to do with your business. That has nothing to do with anything. So, and then you've got this thing like your pitch for an investor is very different than your pitch to a customer. So you could say, well, at a pitch contest, I'm really more thinking about pitching for an investor, and then you would build the pitch that way. But that's not a lot of what I hear in pitch contests either. There's a little bit of that for sure. But you also will have people on the judging panel like me. Like I get asked to judge pitch contests all the time, and I'm not a VC. So heaven help you if you win, right? Because you won, but you're a loser because you built a pitch that works really well to pitch to some marketing consultant lady who's not your customer and not an investor. Like, what did you win at? I don't even understand it. But then the worst part, and then coming back to the positioning thing, is again there's no context. So people stand up and they've got like 10 minutes or sometimes 3 minutes to define the problem space they're in, define how they're different and better than all the other things that are trying to address that problem, and blah blah blah. And so a really sophisticated idea is not a winner at a pitch contest, even if it's potentially really good. What wins at a pitch contest is something that I can really quickly get my head around and say, that sounds pretty cool. And I think if you have something really sophisticated and you're selling to really sophisticated buyers, it's okay to keep your pitch really sophisticated. Because that's what, your buyers are like that. But instead, if you went to the pitch contest, you'd have to dumb that stuff way down. You'd have to get, like your grandmother's got to understand it, even though what you're building is like artificial intelligence for plastic injection molding machines, right? Yeah. And you would never sell to your grandmother, but okay. Anyways. But,
no, it's a perfect example because really my eyes really do gloss over not just the elevator pitches that I get, especially people trying to get on the podcast, but even when I go to networking events and they introduce themselves to me, I'm like, what? Like, it's just amazing that you're right. People just don't know how to really position themselves.
Well, it's hard, right? Like it's not easy. And I'll tell you one thing that's a common problem within startups in particular, one of the root causes of weak positioning is not really understanding who your actual competitive comparables are from a customer point of view. And so what I mean by that is let's say you got some hotshot little startup doing some cool AI for something stuff. You're super smart about that market because you're probably trying to raise some money and you're looking at the features of every other cool startup out there that's doing some cool AI stuff. You're looking at that stuff too. And so a lot of times when I talk to companies like that, I'll say, who's your competitor? And they'll say, oh, well, my competitors are, and they'll list like 20 little startups that literally no one's ever heard of, like 20 of them. And they'll say, yeah, these guys raised $1 million and these folks raised 2 million and these guys are doing some cool stuff and blah, 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 write this big list down. But often if you go talk to their customers, the customers are super happy, the customers that love them, and you say to them, what would you do if this product didn't exist? The answer to that is rarely one of those startups on that list because nobody's heard of them. and each of them has 4 customers. And so you go to your happy customer says, and in B2B, it's terrible, right? And in B2B, most of the time they'll say, yeah, I probably just do it with a spreadsheet. Or, yeah, I hire an intern to do it. Or, we just muscle through, or I take my accounting package and I'd use that. It'd be a pain, but, we get it done. So you can imagine if you're setting out you're trying to build your pitch to say, this is why I'm different and better than the alternatives. If all you're looking at are those 20 cool startups, you might say something like, oh, well, they have terrible UI, all those things. So we're way easier to use. Mm. But meanwhile, your customer is comparing you to, should I buy this thing or should I just hire an intern to do this? And you know what's really easy to use? An intern. Joey, get me a coffee, enter all that stuff in the spreadsheet while you're at it. Oh, yeah. So your differentiator is not easy of use if that's the comparison. You're not easier to use than Excel. You're not easier to use than an intern. So the way you think about your differentiators depends on what you're comparing it to. And you got to see that from a customer point of view, not your super expert on the industry point of view. So that needs to be your starting point for positioning. If you mess that up, then everything downstream is bad, right? These are my differentiated capabilities are wrong. This is the value that's derived from those differentiated capabilities. That's wrong. And then you say, here's my customer segmentation. Well, it's the people that care a lot about that value. Well, that's wrong too. So I guess because you started in the wrong spot. So that's the first step of how you get it done. I can't even remember the question you asked me at the beginning if I got on this rant. But if you mess up the first bit, then the downstream stuff is hard. And so a lot of companies that I talk to, they're amazing. They're super smart. They're experts in their space, but they're not necessarily thinking about it from, I'm a customer. I'm looking for solutions to this particular problem. I am not an expert in all the 9 million startups that are doing stuff in this space. And I don't even want to spend that much time doing research on it. I just need something to solve this problem. And your competitor might be something that you never really thought about. Therefore, your positioning is going to be really different.
Mm. Do you have an example of a company that did a really stellar job in positioning?
Well, I'll tell you, I've done a lot. Like I have a few that I think are really amazing examples. There's been a handful that I've been in charge on, so I knew all the ugliness of what it was before and what it was after, and what we did. Like one was this startup I worked at in Toronto here in Canada. And I came on, this startup had been around for a number of years before I showed up, and they had done a handful of big pivots. But the most recent version of this startup, and this is going back like 15 years, the most recent version of this startup was an enterprise CRM. So in the early days of this company, there were other CRMs on the market, but Salesforce was kind of just coming on the scene, but they were only selling to small, medium businesses. And the gorilla in that market at the time was a company in the Valley called Siebel, and they were 8,000 people, publicly traded, $2 billion revenue, big company. We entered this space with 20 people and 1 million revenue, and we're tiny based in Toronto. And we didn't do a good job thinking about positioning at the beginning, but our idea was we're going to be enterprise CRM too. And so unsurprisingly, every time we got a meeting with a client, the first question we got asked was, how are you different than Siebel? And more importantly, how are you better than Siebel? And the answer to that was, we're kind of aren't. We make less money. We have less employees. We have less customers. But we did have a feature. So we had this feature that no other CRM on the market had. Even today, no CRM does this. And what you can do with this thing is you could model a many-to-many relationship between people instead of companies. In a normal CRM, all the relationships are to a company. But the problem was we didn't understand why customers would care about that. So we always showed it in the demo. We always talked about it because it was our unique feature, but we had a really hard time articulating the value from that feature. So we limped along for a couple of years, and we got kind of a lucky break in terms of a bit of insight about how we could reposition this thing. And we we hired a sales rep, and we had this guy come into the office and to interview for a sales rep job. We said, why should we hire you? And he said, you should hire me because my buddy is the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs, and I'll get you a meeting. And we were like, sounds good to us. So we hired the guy. We get the meeting at Goldman Sachs. I tagged along on the meeting, and the sales rep shows this feature because we always showed it. And the head of investment banking got super, super excited. He's like, so if two people sit on a board together, you can model that. We're like, yeah. And they're like, oh, if this person used to be the lawyer for this company, but now is the lawyer for this company, you can model that. We're like, yeah. And he's like, oh my God, that's so exciting. And he ran out of the room, and he came back with a couple of his vice presidents that work for him. And we showed them the thing again. They get all excited. Everyone's jumping up and down. Like, it was amazing. And we closed this deal really fast. So then we had this thought, like maybe investment bankers really dig our stuff. So set up a bunch more meetings with investment bankers, and every meeting, exact same thing. We show them the thing. They get all excited. They jump up and down. It turns out that what we could enable was kind of fundamental to their sales process. And so, but more importantly, so that was good news. But more importantly, what we really wanted to do is we started to think about maybe we should reposition the whole company. Maybe we're not enterprise CRM. Maybe we're just CRM for investment bankers. And internally, that was a really scary, difficult decision to make. Like our investors didn't like it. The board didn't like it. Because they're like, look, we invested in you because you're going to be $1 billion business, and you're going to sell just to investment banks? Like that? How many investment banks are there on the planet? There's not enough. You won't make enough money doing that. And we struggled with it for a few months, where we looked at the market and we said, well, could we put the prices up? Yes, we could. How big would a deal be? How many of these deals would we have to do? But we started to think, like, look, nobody's buying our stuff anyways. It's not like we're giving anything up. and the way we finally sold it to everybody is we said, look, we're not going to just be investment banking forever. We're going to do investment banking now. And then when we dominate that, we're going to branch out to private client services and research other groups inside the investment bank. Then we're going to go to retail banking, which is a massive market. Then we're going to go to insurance, which is an enormous market. And by the time we get there, we're huge. And then we're going to take on Siebel head to head, and we're going to wreck those guys. And that's how we're going to be $1 billion business. So we did the shift, and the shift was like utterly transformational to the business, like a complete transformation. So we went from every deal we were in, we were competitive with Siebel. Now we'd walk in and we'd say, hey, we're CRM for investment banks. And the bankers would look at us and say, well, wait, hang on. Do you compete with Siebel? And we'd say, oh, Siebel. We love those guys. We absolutely love those guys. What a fantastic company. Look at them. They're so big, so much money, so many people, so great. But if you're a call center in India or a manufacturing plant or a retailer, but not you, Wolf of Wall Street, you need something special. And then we'd show them the thing. Everybody get all excited. And we wouldn't even have a Siebel in the deal. So we go from doing like a little under 2 million revenue. In the next 18 months, we go from a little under 2 million to a little under 80 million.
Whoa.
Exactly. In 18 months, we're hiring people so fast. I've never worked at a company that grew that fast in my life. It is so crazy. And then the crazy end of this story is that Siebel was so mad at us kicking their tail all the way up and down Wall Street that they swooped in and they bought us for $1.3 billion.
Oh.
At the time, biggest acquisition in Canadian history for a software company. And that was positioning, man. That was literally, like, a lot of other stuff had to work too, frankly. But if you were to look back and say what made that thing happen, it was we got super focused and our positioning got right in on our market in a way that we could outrun a way bigger, way more established competitor. It made the value of what we did obvious. And we had a market that was crazy for it. And we just grew like nuts. That's the best example I have in my life.
No.
The best part of that one was too, right? You go back to the board's all worried, like, oh, how are you ever going to make any money, right? And 18 months later, we're the biggest acquisition in Canadian history. It's like, that's how we're going to make money.
Oh, that is such a great story. And it's such a great vision of going, wow, of getting that done right. Like, it really it opens up a bigger can of worms and opportunities. Like, that's really exciting.
Yeah, so so that's it. Like, I mean, and then there's lots of examples of companies that started out, they thrashed around a bit, and then they really honed in on the positioning, and that's where it took off. And that's certainly been my experience, is that at the beginning, you're not always sure who loves your stuff the most and why. So there's always this period of kind of thrashing around where the positioning's a little bit loose. But once you get a certain amount of traction, you should be able to go in and talk to your happiest, best customers and figure out, like, what are my real competitive comparables? What are my real differentiators here? What's the value that drives? And can I tighten my positioning up so that what I'm doing is just attracting these really amazing, best fit customers that really dig what we do, that understand it? And am I hitting them with a message that makes all that goodness obvious to them?
Well, I have to tell you, I love your book title of Obviously Awesome. Because
that's where the title comes from. Obviously Awesome.
I was going to say, that must be it. Because, yes, it's so clever. Because, honestly,
I came up with that myself. That isn't even like, I had editors and stuff help me with this book. But that title, I actually came up with that myself.
Well, honestly, it really is obviously awesome. And that example that you gave really shows how things can really open up in a different, like, landscape by using this. It was funny. I was reading a lot of the reviews of your book, and I have to tell you, like, some of them really jumped out at me. One was said that you could tell that this was written by an operator that has been in the trenches. This book wasn't written by a theory crafter employed by an educational institution.
No.
Raw tactical advice on positioning. I was like, wow. And then another one I was reading, it said, you know what, they've read a lot of books, and, it usually has 100 pages of insight and then 250 pages of fluff. And he says, this book is 250 pages of pure gold. They had to highlight so many sections that they had to rethink their entire corporate positioning strategy. Like, when you hear reviews like that, what does that make you feel?
It makes me feel so good. I'm really happy that people think it's useful. I tell you, because I took so long writing this book, there were a few things that I maybe did different because I'm thinking about my audience. So my audience for this book is, generally, I'm writing the book for startup founders that are struggling with their positioning, but it's also for marketing people inside tech companies that are often responsible for this stuff. But when I thought about it, I thought, and I talk to founders all the time, right? These are the people I work with. And there's a few things I know about founders. One, they don't have time to read a book, man. They're busy. Like, they don't have time to read a book. A lot of them don't even read. Like I have doing an audiobook in the summer, and these folks need that too. But if you give them something that's short but solid, like, they don't want me to repeat myself 900 times. They want me to give them the goods, give me a whole bunch of examples, do it in a way that they get their head around it, and just get on with it. So my original manuscript was more than double, I think almost 3 times the length of the book that I ended up with. And I just kept trying to condense it down. And so the book is quite short on purpose, because I want you to actually read it and finish it and then use this stuff. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to teach this stuff before I wrote the book. So I had already been, spent years kind of on the speaking circuit, talking about positioning, and I've been running these regular classes at startup incubators. And that taught me a lot about what's hard and what isn't hard in trying to learn this stuff. And so I think I got better as a teacher through doing that. And I spent years doing that. And so by the time I was ready to write the book, I knew a lot about, what's going to be hard and what's going to be easy about this concept if I'm trying to teach it to people that, some folks will be marketers, but other folks will be founders that don't have any background in marketing at all. So I got to make it sing for those folks that are deep in their own business, but not necessarily deep in marketing. So I don't know. I hope I did a good job. Like, it seems to be working for people so far. Like, it's only been a few weeks, but yeah, the feedback so far has been really excellent. So that makes me happy.
Yeah. Well, honestly, people are tweeting about it. Like, the reviews really speak.
I know the Twitter, man, Twitter's been crazy. My Twitter's not usually that busy. And I opened up my mentions and I'm like, woohoo, look at all this action. And then I'm going on a book tour. It starts next week. And so I'm going to be around Europe, and I'm doing a bunch of dates across the United States, and I'm in a few different places in Canada. I'm going to Halifax for Atlantic Venture Forum, and I hear this is a really good startup event. But I'm going to be in Calgary. I'm going to Denver. I'm going to Portland. all these little places. So I'm spending the next 5-6 weeks on the road, just kind of talking about stuff, and then it gets quiet over the summer, and then it starts up again, conference season in the fall. But yeah, so this is my year of just talking to people about the book.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that answers my question when I was going to ask was, what's next on the horizon for you? So I think I kind of have an idea of where you're going.
Yeah, it's a lot of me standing on stage talking about this stuff this year, and yeah, trying to get the word out a little bit. So that's going to be my year this year. But yeah, my goal with this thing is I really wanted to produce something useful. Like I'm a consultant, but I'm a pretty busy consultant, and I'm just me. I don't have some big team. So I have absolutely no desire to scale a big agency or a consulting business, at least not right now. Right now, I enjoy being able to be really picky about what clients I work with and what clients I don't. I really enjoy working on this really specialized thing. And so if I was just going to write the book like purely as a calling card for my consulting services, it might have been a bit of a different book, and then obviously it will, I think, inspire some people to call me to work with them, because it's, there's value in having an outside person come in and help with this stuff. But a lot of the companies that call me, they're too far away. Like, I get these calls from Australia, and it's too far away for me to go do a workshop with them. And then I get lots of calls from companies that are like 3-4 people, and they're bootstrapping, and they can barely afford to keep the lights on, let alone bring in a consultant to help with this stuff. And so the idea of the book is for those folks. It gives you a way to kind of take a crack at this on your own without me having to be in the room, and without you having to pay for me to be in the room.
That is so sweet and so giving of you.
Yeah, I mean, it is, right? Like, the other thing is you all this stuff, and you feel like, I'm getting old, man. I could get hit by a bus next week and die of cancer. I should get this all down. Let it out there. And people can just have at it.
I love it. I love it. So, April, finally, how can our listeners connect with you? I mean, I think we need your Twitter handle because we know it blows up all the time.
Go on the Twitters. I'm on the Twitters. I'm at April Dunford on Twitter. And I have a website, which is aprildunford.com.
This has been brilliant. April, I cannot say thank you enough. I mean, the insights, the value bombs, the golden nuggets you provided, they're just phenomenal. And honestly, your book is now becoming one of my top 5 favorites because awesome. It's a really great read. It really makes me rethink a couple of things, and that's for sure. And it makes me stop and pause, and because I definitely have skipped a couple of steps.
That's awesome. That actually makes me feel really good. That's the kind of feedback that makes me go, oh yeah, that was worth 2 years of total pain.
Yes. So people just don't understand the amount of work it takes to put a book together. It's
I did not understand it. I grossly underestimated the effort involved in this thing. Like in my mind, it was going to be way easier. It was terrible. Just straight up terrible. That's all I have to say about it. Like people are like, when are you going to write your next book? And I'm like, never. It's coming never. One and done. That's it.
Well, I was going to say we'll have to get you back for the next book, but we'll have to find a reason to get you back on the podcast.
Yeah, I'll come back and talk about stuff, but it will not be a book. I'll be like, I'm enjoying sitting in my office. It's great.
Oh, this has been an absolute pleasure and delight. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining and listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episode, please share with your friends and colleagues. You can share on social media, the email link, the newsletter, and so on. Let's continue to support these Canadian innovators and help them really grow into bigger brands. Awareness and knowledge is totally key. Anyways, I can't wait to talk to you next week. Cheers.